I am so honored to bring up our next speaker, a person who has literally dedicated her life to peace and dedicated her life to advocating for veterans and dedicated her life to the organization of Veterans for Peace. She is a proud former Navy nurse and was court-martialed during the Vietnam War for her anti-war protests. Please give a very warm welcome to the incredible Susan Schnall.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. At this point, I happen to be president of the National Organization of Veterans for Peace. I've asked other members of Veterans for Peace to come up and join me and have you all understand that there are veterans in this country that stand for peace and social justice for all. We are an organization of former soldiers and veterans of the U.S. wars in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and various other military interventions who oppose militarism and war. We use our experience and lift our collective voice to build a culture of peace. We inform the public of the true causes and enormous costs of war and highlight our obligation to heal the wounds of war. It is an honor for me to be part of an extraordinary and special group of people, those GIs and veterans who returned from war and armed conflict to work for peace and social justice in this country. For them, it's been a wrenching, painful journey from war maker to peacemaker, to be able to question both themselves and their country that participated in armed conflict. Those once young American soldiers live with the memory of what they were involved with so many years ago. In 1967, and that was a while ago, I graduated from Stanford University wearing a black armband signifying my objection to the American war in Vietnam. I had joined the Navy Nurse Corps to care for the wounded from the war, and I learned that simply healing the soldiers might be enough, that being a part of the military war machine enabled the war to continue. Bear with me. Trump and company. We are those you have called suckers and losers who served this country in this military. We are the soldiers who served in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq that lost over 65,000 lives, who returned home with illnesses and disabilities related to war, to Agent Orange, to burn pits, to post-traumatic stress that affected not only our lives, but those of our families, our children, and our community. We are not your crony oligarchs who got out of service because they had bone spurs or some other made-up condition, and wealthy parents that got them out of the service. We will not be erased. We served this country. Veterans make up 1/3 of the employees in the United States Department of Veteran Affairs and is facing a cut of 17% of its workforce. This, it is deplorable. This is creating chaos with a delay in benefits, straining claims and processing, delaying school assistance for student veterans. Delay in benefits under the congressional recently passed PACT Act that is finally recognizing the victims of burn pits in Afghanistan. It was a promise to address the Comprehensive Toxins Act, and we are now experiencing a delay. The United States Department of Veteran Affairs is the second largest agency after the Defense Department. And I would say that any time a country decides to send its people to war, it has the obligation to prepare for those who return from war. Federal law requires that veterans be given an advantage over people who have not served, and to retain veterans over other employees during layoffs, to acknowledge the government's obligation to veterans. Is that happening today? We served, and now you want to take away our needed services to feed your friends, to give them the most wealthy tax breaks at our expense. Whose interests are you all serving besides your own? We are all immigrants, except for the native people whose land we stole, whose cultures we have tried to decimate, whose health care services, education, housing, social services from the United States government have continued to decrease in quality over the years. And Trump, you too are an immigrant, even though your grandfather immigrated in 1885. And let me remind you, immigrants are human beings. They're not aliens. And certainly not illegal aliens, as you and your cronies call them. Your stories equating immigrants with danger and criminality are not new. This happens after surges in immigration by new groups. The Irish, Catholic, Jewish, Italian, Mexican, Japanese, Chinese, and German people were often followed by backlashes linking them with crime and disorder. This centuries-old fable is aimed at boosting a politics of exclusion, not one seriously concerned with the true causes of crime. Narratives equating immigrants with danger and criminality are nothing new. And a reminder to all of you, immigrants pay taxes. They pay taxes. That information is contained in the files of the Internal Revenue Service database. That is why they and Musk and Trump want to get access to those files so they can then find out the new immigrants and try to deport them. And unlike you, Mr. President, these people pay taxes. They work in construction, agriculture, senior care, hospitality. What will you do when they're gone? The United States military has assisted in more than a dozen military deportation flights to Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, Ecuador, Peru, and India. And this administration has also flown Venezuelan migrants to the U.S. Naval Base in Guantanamo Bay. They said late in January that the administration would prepare to detain up to 30 migrants there. And a reminder to everybody, 30,000, yes. Private prisons are crashing in as part of the administration's plan to hold undocumented immigrants. At a rally in Iowa on October 16, 2023, he declared, quote, "In the wake of the attacks on Israel, Americans have been disgusted to see the open support for terrorists among legions of foreign nationals on college campuses." Quote, "They're teaching your children hate." No, Mr. Trump, we're teaching our children to love. To stop the killing, to stop the genocide on the people of Gaza. To stop the destruction of the land, of all living things, because we choose to love and not hate. You and your supplicants are the ones teaching, preaching hate, not those working for peace. You try to label the protesters of genocide on college campuses as threats to American foreign policy. Well, Mr. President, I disagree with your foreign policy in Gaza. Let me go further. I am a Jew opposed to your foreign policy in Gaza. Are you going to label me as anti-Semitic and try to deport me too? Like Mohammed Khalil, who was kidnapped from Columbia University housing, arrested, and is held in a Louisiana detention facility. Because his presence in the United States is adversarial to this country's foreign policy and national security interests. Let me be clear. Genocide, the supplying of armaments to a country that is committing genocide, is against the interests of this country. You are adversarial to the American people. You and the arms makers are adversarial to national security interests of this country. You are committing war crimes. You support Israel as it unleashes hell and destruction on the people in Gaza with total impunity. Israel has carried out acts prohibited under the Genocide Convention with a specific intent to destroy Palestinians. These include killings causing serious bodily harm or mental harm and deliberately inflicting on Palestinians in Gaza conditions of life calculated to bring about their destruction. Month after month, Israel has treated Palestinians in Gaza as a subhuman group unworthy of human rights and dignity. Last year, in February of 2024, Veterans for Peace wrote to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken about the violations of the Geneva Genocide Convention and national law, drawing the connection between shipments of weapons to Israel and the committing of genocide against the people in Gaza. And 1 year ago, on February 25th, Aaron Bushnell, an active duty airman, spoke, quote, "I am an active duty member of the United States Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit in genocide."
Yes, Aaron.
I am about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal. Free Palestine.
Free Palestine.
And at that moment, he doused his body in gasoline and set himself on fire. To many of us in Veterans of Peace have seen the suffering war creates, and it never leaves our memories. All of us agonize over our government's aiding and abetting the slaughtering of innocents. These policymakers, swaddled in privilege, take their orders from those who profit from death and suffering. We know who they are. The people who run Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics, and their fellow merchants of death, and the people who finance what the merchants do. They operate on a grand scale internationally, but also on a singular small scale. They as much as lit the match for Aaron Bushnell. The fire that killed Alan Bushnell was simply the collateral damage, as it's so callously called, of the ongoing conflagration in Palestine. Hey, America, listen to us. We were the soldiers you sent to Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Iraq, Afghanistan, Okinawa, Japan, Korea, Niger, Syria. Through television and social media, we are witness to the antipathy and ignorance of the American public as wars rage at home toward those in poor communities and people of color. We are incited by news organizations that constantly blast accounts of the war on Gaza and in Ukraine and the Middle East as though we're watching a football game, leading the cheering section of revelers. Let me tell you, as a veteran who cared for soldiers during the American war in Southeast Asia, war injures all who participate. It kills the body and soul. It damages communities and families. It impacts generations. And who profits? The war industry, the merchants of death that produce and distribute armaments. It drains our social resources that are life-sustaining, our education, healthcare, social services, housing, and uses those resources for death and destruction. And most of us continue to go on with our lives, overwhelmed by the enormity of the challenges facing us. We who know the truth have a responsibility to share it with others, to organize to lead the way toward a sustainable future. War and militarism are destroying the planet. Hey, America, wake up and listen to me. We are at war in this country, on this land. We are killing our children. We have become the monster in the world that produces more armaments, more battleships, more drones that annihilate whole communities with the push of a button. We destroy our young. We kill school children with impunity. We poison our water and food supply. We send our military might all over the world and use it against people of color here. America, what have we become? How did we become immune to the dead children in Texas and Georgia, Chicago, and Parkland, killed by gun violence? How did we become immune to school children killed by guns produced in America, by gunmen produced in America? We export our military violence to the highest bidder, and today, that is Israel. America, we supply the arms used to the Palestinian children in Gaza. We starve the children in Gaza as we starve children in other parts of the world. We look for wars as outlets for our munitions industry. We perpetuate violence in the Middle East. We starve, imprison, attack civilians in Gaza. Let me be clear. Veterans for Peace opposes all targeting of civilians. We denounce the Hamas attacks on civilians and children as we denounce the Israeli attacks on Gaza. Our government uses our tax dollars to inflame the struggle and fighting in the Middle East and in Ukraine. Without the continuation and the start of a ceasefire in Ukraine, this war, like all wars, will continue to escalate. We must break the pattern of escalating violence that feeds hatred, escalates violence, creates orphans, and self-replicates indefinitely. It is our tax dollars that have made America the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. I think of those lives changed forever by war and conflict. And along with millions of others, rededicate myself to healing the wounds of war, to working for peace and social justice, to bringing an end to armed conflict, to move us from a war economy to a peace economy, to care for those harmed, and to stop this insanity called war wherever it is. To end corporate power and destruction, to be life-giving instead of death-giving. For if we, and I know there's a lot of veterans here, if we who have known war don't dedicate ourselves to ending it, who will? Thank you.
Hear it, everybody. Make some noise.